I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. The day we buried Frank was the coldest October day I could remember in 30 years. Not because of the weather, it was actually unseasonably warm, but because after 40 years of marriage, I was standing alone beside a mahogany casket, feeling like half of my heart had been buried with him. "Mom, you need to eat something," Michael whispered, his hand on my shoulder as the last of the funeral guests filtered out of our modest home. His touch was gentle, but I could sense the tension in his fingers. He'd been hovering around me like this since the doctor had called with Frank's test results 3 months ago. "I'm fine, honey," I replied automatically, the words feeling hollow even to my own ears. I wasn't fine. At 63, I'd never imagined being alone. Frank and I had planned to grow old together, to see our grandchildren graduate college, to celebrate our 50th anniversary. "Susan, Michael's right," Jessica chimed in, her voice carrying that syrupy sweetness she reserved for moments when she wanted something. My daughter-in-law stood in my kitchen doorway, looking immaculate in her black designer dress, not a hair out of place despite the emotional day. "You really should eat. I made you a plate." I nodded, accepting the food I had no appetite for. It struck me as odd how attentive Jessica had been these past few days. In the 7 years she'd been married to Michael, she'd always maintained a polite but distant relationship with Frank and me. Now suddenly, she was organizing the funeral reception, answering my phone, and handling the steady stream of casseroles from well-meaning neighbors. "Have you given any thought to what you'll do now?" Jessica asked, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. "This house must feel so empty." I looked around the dining room where Frank and I had shared breakfast every morning for 35 years. The walls needed painting. The carpet was worn in places, but it was home, our home. "I haven't thought that far ahead," I admitted. "Well, there's no rush," Michael said, but Jessica shot him a look I couldn't quite decipher. "Of course there's no rush," she agreed, reaching for my hand. "But you know, sometimes a fresh start can be healing. New surroundings, new possibilities." I nodded absently, my mind drifting to the envelope I'd received yesterday from Frank's life insurance company. The policy had been substantial, far more than I'd expected. Frank had always handled our finances, and I was only now discovering the careful planning he'd put into ensuring I'd be taken care of. "The insurance company called yesterday," I said, not entirely sure why I was sharing this information. Frank's policy came through. The subtle shift in Jessica's posture was almost imperceptible, but I caught it a straightening of her spine, a new alertness in her eyes. "That's wonderful. Mom," Michael said, genuine relief in his voice. "That should help with, well, everything." "How much was the policy for?" Jessica asked, then quickly added, "I mean, not that it's any of my business, but just so we know you're taken care of." "Enough," I said simply, suddenly feeling protective of this last gift from Frank. Later that night, after Michael and Jessica had gone home, I sat alone in Frank's recliner, clutching his old cardigan around my shoulders. The house creaked and settled around me, familiar sounds that now only emphasized his absence. "What am I supposed to do now?" "Frank," I whispered to the empty room, 40 years of being someone's wife, someone's partner. And now I was just Susan. Just Susan Miller. Widow, 63 years old. With an uncertain future stretching before me. I must have fallen asleep in his chair because I woke with a start at 3 a.m, my neck stiff and my eyes swollen from crying. As I made my way upstairs to our bedroom, my bedroom now, I passed the small desk where Frank kept our financial documents. On an impulse, I sat down and opened the top drawer. Frank had always been methodical, and his filing system was impeccable. Insurance policies, bank statements, retirement accounts, all neatly labeled and organized. I began reading through them, wanting to understand my financial situation. By dawn, I had spread the papers across the dining room table and made several revelations. First, Frank had been far more financially savvy than I'd given him credit for. Our modest lifestyle had masked careful investments and prudent savings. Second, between his life insurance, our retirement accounts, and some investments I hadn't known about, I was now worth well over $1 million. The realization didn't bring joy, only a deep ache that Frank wouldn't be here to enjoy the fruits of his planning. But as the morning sun streamed through the kitchen window, warming the scattered papers, I felt something else emerging through the grief, a sense of possibility. Frank had given me not just financial security, but freedom. Freedom to choose what came next. I was still sitting there when my phone rang. It was Michael. "Mom, just checking in. Jessica and I thought we might come by later to help you sort through some things." "That would be nice," I said, gathering the financial documents into a neat pile. Something told me to keep what I'd discovered to myself, at least for now. Maybe around noon. After hanging up, I made a fresh pot of coffee and watched the birds at the feeder Frank had installed outside the kitchen window. A cardinal Frank's favorite landed on the perch, its bright red plumage a splash of color against the autumn landscape. "I'm going to be okay," I told the bird, and for the first time since the funeral, I almost believed it. Michael and Jessica began visiting almost daily after the funeral. At first, their attention felt like a lifeline, a connection to the world beyond my grief. But as weeks passed, I noticed a pattern forming. Their visits often coincided with the arrival of my mail. Jessica would casually collect it from the box, sorting through it at my kitchen table while Michael engaged me in conversation. "The electric bill is due next week," she would announce, setting aside certain envelopes. "And here's something from the bank. Shall I open it for you?" "Susan?" Initially, I appreciated the help. The administrative tasks of life felt overwhelming in my grief. But one afternoon, as I returned from the bathroom, I paused in the hallway, hearing Jessica's voice from the kitchen. "It's another bank statement," she was saying softly to Michael. "The balance is higher than last month. The insurance money must have been deposited." I stood perfectly still, my heart suddenly racing. Why was Jessica so interested in my bank balance? "Mom doesn't need to worry about finances right now," Michael replied. "Let's just make sure her bills are paid." I retreated a few steps, then made a show of approaching noisily. When I entered the kitchen, Jessica was calmly pouring tea, the bank statement nowhere in sight. "I was just telling Michael you should consider investing some of your money," Jessica said casually. "Just letting it sit in a checking account isn't very strategic." I nodded, accepting the tea. "Frank always handled our investments. Real estate is always a solid option," Jessica continued. "Something stable, something that gives you security for the future." That night, after they'd left, I searched for my bank statement but couldn't find it. The next morning, I called the bank and requested that future statements be sent electronically to an email address I created specifically for financial matters. The following week, Jessica arrived with a realtor's business card. "Diane is an old college friend," she explained. "She specializes in helping people downsize. This house must be too much for you to manage alone." "I'm managing just fine," I said, more sharply than intended. "Of course you are," Jessica backpedaled smoothly. "But wouldn't it be nice to have something newer, lower maintenance, maybe closer to us?" Michael nodded enthusiastically. "We just want you to be happy. Mom, to have a fresh start." Their concern seemed genuine, but something felt off. That evening, as I was putting away groceries, I overheard Jessica on her phone in my living room. "Uncle Robert, I'm telling you, it's the perfect opportunity," she was saying in a hushed tone. "She's completely lost without Frank. She'll do whatever Michael suggests." "Yes, I understand how estate planning works." "No, she doesn't have a clue about finances. We're working on it. The house is the first step." I froze, a can of soup halfway to the shelf. Estate planning my house. What exactly was Jessica discussing with this Uncle Robert? The conversation ended abruptly when she realized I was within earshot. She flashed me a bright smile when I entered the living room. "Just catching up with family," she explained, slipping her phone into her pocket. "Uncle Robert always checks in after someone passes. He's thoughtful that way." I nodded, keeping my face neutral while my mind raced. That night, I searched online for Uncle Robert Johnson estate planning and discovered he was a financial advisor specializing in wealth transfer and inheritance tax strategies in Connecticut. Jessica's family was from Connecticut. The next day, I visited my bank in person and asked to speak with a financial advisor. Patricia Barnes was a woman about my age, with a no-nonsense manner and reading glasses perched on her nose. "I recently lost my husband," I explained, "and I'm trying to get a handle on my finances." "I'm sorry for your loss," Patricia said, her sympathy genuine but not cloying. "Let's take a look at your situation." Over the next hour, Patricia helped me understand my financial position. She confirmed what I had already discovered thanks to Frank's careful planning. I was in an excellent position. I had no mortgage, substantial savings, and a steady income from Frank's pension and Social Security. "You're in better shape than many of my clients," Patricia observed. "What are your goals now?" I hesitated, then decided to be honest. "I'm not sure. My son and daughter-in-law seem eager for me to sell my house and move, possibly invest in something new. But I'm not convinced that's what I want." Patricia's eyes narrowed slightly. "Mrs. Miller, while I can't give you personal advice, I will say this: don't make any major financial decisions while you're still grieving. And if family members are pressuring you, take that as a red flag." As I was leaving, Patricia handed me her business card. "Call me directly if you have questions, and consider setting up a trust for your assets. It gives you more control." That evening, as I was sorting through some of Frank's old photographs, I found a picture of us standing proudly in front of our first home, a tiny starter house we'd scrimped and saved for. The memory of that struggle, of building something together from nothing, crystallized something in my mind. I didn't want to leave our home, at least not yet, and I certainly didn't want Jessica making that decision for me. The next time Michael and Jessica visited, I was prepared. "I've been thinking about what you said," I told them, serving coffee in Frank's favorite mugs. "About the house." Jessica perked up immediately. "Have you considered calling Diane?" "Actually, I've decided not to sell right now," I said firmly. "This house holds too many memories of your father. Michael, I'm not ready to let that go." Michael nodded understandingly, but Jessica's smile faltered. "But Susan, memories can be so painful after a loss. A fresh environment would help you heal." "Maybe someday," I conceded, "but not now." Jessica opened her mouth to argue further, but Michael placed a hand on her arm. "Mom knows what's best for her. Jess, we need to respect that." The look Jessica gave him could have curdled milk. Later, as they were leaving, Jessica hung back while Michael went to start the car. "Susan, I understand you're attached to this house," she said, her voice soft with concern. "But Michael and I have been discussing our future too. We're thinking about starting a family soon, and we'd hope to find a larger home. Your support would make such a difference." The emotional manipulation was so transparent I almost laughed. Instead, I patted her hand. "When you're ready to start a family, we'll talk about how I can help. But selling my home won't be part of that conversation." Jessica's expression hardened for just a moment before she composed herself. "Of course. I just want what's best for everyone." As I watched them drive away, I felt a strange mix of sadness and resolve. My relationship with my son and his wife was changing, and not necessarily for the better, but for the first time since Frank's death, I felt something other than grief. I felt a determination to protect what Frank and I had built together and to discover what I might build on my own. 2 weeks later, I was driving home from the grocery store when I took a wrong turn into a neighborhood I rarely visited. Elm Street was lined with mature oak trees, their leaves a tapestry of red and gold in the late autumn sun. The houses were older, stately homes with character and history Victorian architecture, wraparound porches, and meticulously maintained gardens. I slowed the car as I passed a particularly beautiful home with a for sale sign in the front yard. It was a 3-story Victorian with gingerbread trim, a wraparound porch, and a tower room on one corner. Something about it called to me, and on impulse, I pulled over and wrote down the realtor's number. That evening, I called and arranged a viewing for the following day. I told myself I was just curious, that there was no harm in looking, but as I walked through the front door with the realtor, Linda Morales, something shifted inside me. "This home was built in 1898, Linda explained as we stood in the grand entryway with its original hardwood floors and ornate staircase. "It has 6 bedrooms, 3.5 bathrooms, and over 4,000 square feet of living space. I followed her from room to room, enchanted by the high ceilings, the crown molding, the built-in bookshelves, and window seats. The kitchen had been modernized, but thoughtfully, preserving the home's character while adding contemporary conveniences. The backyard is almost half an acre, Linda continued, leading me through French doors onto a stone patio. There's plenty of space for gardening, entertaining, or just enjoying the privacy. I stood on the patio, picturing summer barbecues with Michael and the grandchildren I hoped would come someday. I could see Frank's rocking chair on the porch, although Frank would never sit there. I could imagine Christmas mornings in the grand living room, Thanksgiving dinners in the spacious dining room. "It's beautiful," I said softly. "What's the asking price?" When Linda told me, I tried not to flinch. It was substantial, nearly all of Frank's life insurance money, but not impossible. "The current owners are moving overseas," Linda added. "They're motivated to sell quickly and would consider a cash offer." "I'll think about it," I promised, and I did all night long. The next morning, I called Patricia Barnes at the bank. "I need some advice about a potential investment," I explained, then described the Victorian house. "It's a significant purchase," Patricia said cautiously. "Are you thinking of living there yourself? Or is this a rental property investment?" I hesitated. "I'm not entirely sure yet, but something about this house speaks to me." Patricia suggested I consider setting up a trust for the purchase. "It provides legal protection and privacy," she explained. "If you decide to go forward, I can recommend a good attorney to help with the process." That afternoon, I visited Eleanor Thompson's law office. Eleanor was a petite black woman in her 50s with an air of absolute competence. After listening to my situation, she nodded thoughtfully. "A trust is definitely the way to go," she agreed. "It keeps the property separate from your personal assets and offers several advantages for estate planning." "And privacy?" I asked, thinking of Jessica's unusual interest in my finances. Eleanor's eyes sharpened. "Yes, considerable privacy. The trust would be the legal owner, not you personally. Your name wouldn't appear on public records associated with the property." Something about Eleanor's direct manner made me trust her. I found myself explaining about Michael and Jessica, their sudden interest in my finances, and the overheard phone conversation about estate planning. Eleanor's expression grew serious. "Mrs. Miller, what you're describing could be the beginning of elder financial abuse. It's more common than people realize, especially within families." "Jessica wouldn't," I began automatically, then stopped. "Would she?" The conversations with her uncle, her keen interest in my bank statements, her insistence that I sell my home, suddenly it all looked different in this new light. "I'm not saying that's what's happening," Eleanor clarified. "But I've seen enough cases to recognize the warning signs. Setting up a trust is a good first step in protecting yourself." By the end of the week, I had established the Miller Family Trust with Eleanor's help, contacted Linda Morales, and made a cash offer on the Victorian house. To my surprise, the offer was accepted immediately. Linda connected me with Sarah Wilson at Premier Property Management, who would handle the practical aspects of the property while renovations were completed. "Since you're not moving in immediately, we'll oversee the contractors and make sure everything is secure," Sarah explained during our first meeting. "We can also handle utility setup, landscaping, and any other maintenance needs." Sarah was a brisk, efficient woman in her 40s who clearly knew her business. "The property will be listed under the trust's name," I explained. "I'd prefer to keep my personal involvement private for now." Sarah nodded, not asking for explanations. "We're very discreet with all our clients. Mrs. Miller, your privacy is guaranteed." As I signed the property management agreement, a strange sense of excitement bubbled up inside me. For the first time since Frank's death, I was making a major decision entirely on my own. The house would need renovations, updating the electrical system, refinishing the hardwood floors, modernizing the remaining bathrooms, but I could envision it completed, not just as an investment, but as a gift, because somewhere during this process, an idea had taken root. What if I renovated this beautiful home not for myself, but for Michael and Jessica? Despite their sometimes questionable methods, I knew they wanted a larger home to start a family. This Victorian had plenty of space for children, for entertaining, even for Jessica's parents if they needed to visit. It would be the perfect surprise, a home they loved, fully paid for, with no mortgage to worry about. It would give them security and a fresh start. And it would give me the satisfaction of providing for my family in a meaningful way. I kept the purchase a complete secret. When Michael called to check in, I mentioned vaguely that I was looking into some investments, but nothing specific. When Jessica inquired about my finances, I deflected with generalities. Over the next 6 weeks, I threw myself into the renovation process. I visited the house nearly every day, consulting with contractors, selecting materials, and overseeing the transformation. I chose neutral, modern colors for the walls, upgraded the kitchen appliances to top-of-the-line models, and added subtle touches I knew Jessica would appreciate: a soaking tub in the master bathroom, a wine fridge in the kitchen, a custom organization system in the walk-in closets. The master bedroom became a showcase, with a sitting area, fireplace, and French doors leading to a private balcony. I pictured Michael and Jessica enjoying morning coffee there, watching their future children play in the backyard below. One of the smaller bedrooms I decorated as a nursery, painted in gentle yellows and greens, ready for the grandchild I hoped would come soon. Another bedroom I set up as a home office for Michael, with built-in shelves and a comfortable workspace. The tower room, with its panoramic views of the neighborhood, became a reading nook with a window seat, plush cushions, and bookshelves. I imagined future grandchildren curled up there with books on rainy days. Each decision was made with Michael and Jessica in mind, each room designed to meet their needs and preferences. The cost was substantial, nearly all of Frank's life insurance money, but the joy of creating this gift sustained me through the long days of renovation and the lonely evenings at home. By early December, the house was nearly finished. The hardwood floors gleamed, the new paint brightened each room, and the updated fixtures added modern convenience while respecting the home's historic character. I had even begun moving in some furniture: a dining table large enough for family gatherings, comfortable sofas for the living room, beds for each bedroom. The night before I planned to reveal my surprise, I stood in the empty living room, imagining Michael and Jessica's faces when I handed them the keys. Would they be shocked? Grateful? Would they understand the love behind this gift as I looked around at the beautiful home I had created for them? I felt Frank's presence strongly. "I think they're going to love it," I whispered to him. "I hope I'm doing the right thing." I had no idea how wrong I was about to be. The morning I planned to surprise Michael and Jessica, I arrived at the Victorian early to make sure everything was perfect. The December air was crisp, and the house looked like something from a holiday card. Its gingerbread trim and wide porch dusted with a light snow that had fallen overnight. Inside, sunlight streamed through the tall windows, making the freshly polished hardwood floors glow. I walked from room to room, straightening a pillow here, adjusting a lamp there, my excitement building with each step. Everything was ready. The house was move-in ready. The utilities were connected, and I had even arranged for a small Christmas tree in the living room, a symbol of new beginnings. I was practically vibrating with excitement as I called Michael. "Hi, Mom. Everything okay?" he answered, a note of concern in his voice. Since Frank's death, my calls often seemed to trigger this response, as if he expected bad news. "Everything's wonderful," I assured him. "I was wondering if you and Jessica could meet me for lunch today. I have something I'd like to show you both." There was a pause on the line. "Actually, Mom, Jessica and I are looking at houses today. We found this amazing place that might be perfect for our family expansion." My heart skipped a beat. "Family expansion? Are you having a baby?" "Well, not exactly," Michael said carefully. "We're thinking about Jessica's parents moving in with us. Her mom's arthritis is getting worse, and her dad needs someone to help manage his medications. We could really use a bigger place." I smiled, thinking how perfect the timing was. The Victorian had plenty of room for Jessica's parents, too. "That's wonderful, honey. Where are you looking?" "This gorgeous Victorian on Elm Street," Michael replied, his voice animated. 6 bedrooms, huge kitchen, perfect for multi-generational living. The only problem is the asking price. It's way out of our range." My stomach dropped. They were looking at my house. My surprise was about to become their disappointment when they discovered they couldn't afford it, unless… Kevin, what if I helped with the down payment as an early inheritance? I suggested, the words tumbling out before I'd fully processed the situation. The excitement in his voice was immediate. Mom, that would be incredible. Are you sure it's a lot of money? I'm sure, I said, mind racing. Text me the address and I'll meet you there in an hour. I hung up and sat down at the kitchen island, staring at my phone. This could actually work out even better than I'd planned. Instead of just giving them the house, I could let them think they were choosing it, then help them buy it. They'd feel like equal partners instead of charity cases. But something felt off about the situation. How had Michael and Jessica found this house? It wasn't listed on the market anymore. I'd purchased it weeks ago through the trust, and the for sale sign had been removed. I called Sarah at the property management company. Mrs. Miller, good morning, she answered efficiently. Is everything all right with the house? Sarah, has anyone been showing the house without my knowledge? I asked directly. Absolutely not, she assured me. The only people with access are you, me, and the contractors, who finished up yesterday. Why do you ask? My son just called about viewing this house today. He thinks it's on the market. There was a pause on the line. That's very strange. Let me check with my assistant, Ashley. She handles the scheduling for property viewings. While waiting for Sarah to investigate, I made a quick decision. I would arrive at the house before Michael and Jessica, park across the street, and observe them. If they were genuinely interested in the house by coincidence, I would proceed with my surprise. If something else was going on, I wanted to know before revealing myself. Sarah called back within 15 minutes, her voice tight with professionalism. Mrs. Miller, I owe you an apology. It appears my assistant, Ashley, has been allowing someone access to the property. A woman named Jessica Miller claimed to be your daughter-in-law and said you had asked her to check on the renovation progress while you were dealing with grief. Ashley, being new and unfamiliar with our security protocols, gave her a key for family access. My blood ran cold. Jessica has a key to my house. I'm deeply sorry, Mrs. Miller. Ashley has been reprimanded, and we're changing all the locks immediately. We'll also review our security procedures to ensure this never happens again. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. Jessica had been inside my house, the house I had purchased as a surprise gift for her and Michael. How long had she known about it? Why hadn't she mentioned it to me? And what exactly had she been doing there? I arrived at Elm Street 30 minutes before Michael and Jessica were due to arrive. I parked my car down the block, where I had a clear view of the house but wouldn't be immediately noticeable. The day had turned overcast, matching my mood as I waited. At precisely 1:00 p.m., Jessica's white SUV pulled into the driveway. She emerged first, looking polished in a camel coat and high-heeled boots, followed by Michael in his work clothes. He must have taken a lunch break from the office. But they weren't alone. An older couple also exited the vehicle, the woman walking with a slight limp, likely Jessica's mother with the arthritis she'd mentioned. I watched as Jessica led them around the front yard, gesturing expansively at different features of the house. She pointed at windows, the porch, the landscaping I'd carefully selected. Her body language wasn't that of someone seeing a house for the first time. It was confident, proprietary, as if she were already giving a tour of her home. After about 20 minutes of exploring the exterior, Jessica produced a key from her purse and unlocked the front door. My front door, the door to the house I owned, the house I'd spent weeks renovating as a gift. They all disappeared inside, and I sat in my car, a cold fury building in my chest. They weren't looking at the house like potential buyers. They were already planning how they would use it, which meant Jessica must have known about my purchase almost from the beginning. But how I called Eleanor Thompson, my attorney. Eleanor, something strange is happening, I explained, then told her about Michael and Jessica viewing the house I'd purchased under the trust. Mrs. Miller, only a few people know you're the beneficiary of that trust, Eleanor said, her voice concerned. The paperwork is confidential. The only way your daughter-in-law could know is if someone at the bank, the property management company, or my office leaked the information. Or if she intercepted communications about the purchase, I added, remembering how Jessica had been collecting my mail in those early weeks after Frank's death. That's troubling, Eleanor said carefully. If she accessed your private financial information without permission, that's potentially illegal. What are you planning to do? I'm not sure yet, I admitted. But I need to understand what's happening before I confront them. After hanging up, I continued to watch the house. Jessica, Michael, and her parents spent almost an hour inside before emerging. Jessica's mother was smiling broadly, and her father was nodding as Michael gestured toward the upper floors, clearly explaining something about the house. They stood in the driveway talking for another 15 minutes before Jessica's parents got back in the SUV. Before joining them, Jessica pulled out a measuring tape from her large purse and handed it to Michael. They walked back to the front porch, measuring the width of the doorway and the porch itself. They were measuring my house, planning furniture arrangements, renovations, or decorations for a house they didn't own, a house they supposedly couldn't afford, a house they were supposedly seeing for the first time. Unless Jessica knew something I didn't, unless this whole charade about other buyers and lost opportunities was covering up something much worse. I waited until they drove away before approaching the house. Using my key, I entered and walked through each room, looking for signs of their visit. In the master bedroom, the room I'd carefully designed with Jessica's taste in mind, I found a tape measure on the windowsill. They'd been measuring for curtains, perhaps, or furniture placement. In the kitchen, a cabinet door stood slightly ajar. Inside, I found a notepad with Jessica's handwriting, "New countertops ask about Sub-Zero fridge." They were planning renovations to my renovations. But the most disturbing discovery came in what I'd set up as a nursery. The yellow and green walls I'd painted with such hope now felt like a mockery. On the windowsill sat a paint swatch card in pale pink, written across it in Jessica's flowing script, perfect for Elizabeth's room. Elizabeth, Jessica's mother. They were planning to give her the nursery I'd created for my future grandchild. I sank onto the window seat, the paint swatch trembling in my hand. The house I'd purchased as a loving gift for my son and his wife was being repurposed before my eyes, not as a home for their future family, but as a residence for Jessica's parents, with Michael and Jessica in charge. And somehow, Jessica had known about my purchase almost from the beginning, had acquired a key through deception, and was now orchestrating an elaborate charade to manipulate me into funding their plans. The hurt was so deep it felt physical, a hollowness expanding in my chest until I could barely breathe. I'd used nearly all of Frank's life insurance money to create this gift, this future for our family. And Jessica, perhaps Michael too, had been playing me for a fool. I made 3 decisions in that moment, sitting in the nursery that would never welcome my grandchild. First, I would not reveal that I owned the house not yet. I needed to see how far they would take this deception. Second, I would change every lock immediately and install security cameras to monitor who came and went. Third, I would move into the Victorian myself, today. If Jessica wanted to play games with my property, she was going to discover I could play them better. I called Sarah Wilson at the property management company. I need a locksmith at the Elm Street property immediately. Every lock, every door, and I need a security system installed today, cameras at every entrance, inside and out. Mrs. Miller, I'm still so sorry about the breach of Telm. This isn't about that, I interrupted. This is about securing my property. I'll be moving in today. Please make sure it's ready. By evening, I had packed essential belongings from my old house and moved them to the Victorian. The locks had been changed, the security cameras installed, and I'd learned how to monitor them from my phone. I ordered dinner delivery and ate it at the grand dining room table, alone but resolute. As darkness fell, I walked through the beautiful home I'd created with such love and hope. Each room now felt different, tainted by deception but also charged with a new purpose. This would be my home now, my fresh start, my declaration of independence. You wouldn't believe what's happening, Frank, I whispered to the empty room, but I think you'd be proud of how I'm handling it. That night, I slept in the master bedroom, the one I'd designed for Michael and Jessica. The irony wasn't lost on me, nor was the fact that tomorrow would bring a confrontation I wasn't sure I was ready for. But as I drifted off to sleep, I felt strangely calm. The worst had already happened. I discovered the truth about my son and daughter-in-law's intentions. Everything else was just details, and I was more than ready to deal with those details. The morning light filtered through the curtains of the master bedroom, waking me gently. For a moment, I forgot where I was, reaching instinctively for Frank beside me. The empty space brought reality crashing back. Frank was gone. I was in the Victorian house I'd bought as a gift, and my son and daughter-in-law had been deceiving me. I checked the security app on my phone. No activity overnight, which meant Jessica hadn't returned with her key. But the day was young. After a simple breakfast in my new kitchen, I called Michael's office and was told he'd taken the day off. Interesting. I then tried his cell phone, but the call went straight to voicemail. Even more interesting, rather than leave a message, I texted him, "Hope you're enjoying your day off. Let me know when you're free to talk about that house on Elm Street." I spent the morning unpacking and organizing my belongings, setting up my own space in what had been intended as Jessica's parents' room, a smaller bedroom on the first floor with an attached bathroom, far from the master suite upstairs. If I was going to live here, I wanted to establish my own territory separate from the spaces I'd designed for them. Around noon, my security app chimed. Someone was at the front door. Through the camera, I saw Jessica, alone, trying to insert a key into the lock. When it didn't work, she frowned and tried again, jiggling the key with increasing frustration. Finally, she walked around to the back door, where the same scene played out. I watched, oddly detached, as she pulled out her phone and made a call, her body language agitated. Minutes later, my phone rang. It was Michael. "Mom, the strangest thing happened," he began without preamble. "Jessica drove by that house we were looking at, and she thinks someone might have changed the locks. She's worried there might be squatters or vandalism." "Why would Jessica be checking on a house you don't own?" I asked calmly. There was a pause. "She thought she saw broken windows from the street. She was just being a good neighbor." The lies were getting more elaborate. "Michael, how did Jessica get a key to that house?" Another pause. Longer this time. "What key? She tried to unlock the front door this morning. I saw her on the security cameras." Silence. Then Michael's voice, carefully controlled. "Mom, what security cameras?" "The ones I had installed yesterday on my house." "The house I own." "The house I bought 6 weeks ago with your father's life insurance money." "The house I've been renovating while you and Jessica plan to manipulate me into funding your dream home with my inheritance." The sound that came through the phone might have been Michael choking on his coffee, or it might have been the sound of someone's entire deception collapsing in real time. "Your house," he finally whispered. "The house I bought as a surprise gift for your family." I continued, my voice steady despite the hurt churning inside me. "The house I spent weeks renovating with you and Jessica in mind. The house Jessica somehow discovered I'd purchased and has been secretly visiting with a key she obtained through deception." The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Finally, he spoke. "Mom, we need to talk." "Yes, Michael, we certainly do. But first, I think you need to explain to your wife that trespassing on someone else's property is illegal, even when you think you're clever enough not to get caught." I ended the call and sat down heavily on the sofa. The confrontation I'd been anticipating had begun, and while I'd maintained my composure during the call, I now felt drained. How had things gone so wrong? How had a gift of love transformed into this web of deception through the security app? I watched as Jessica returned to her SUV and drove away. Her posture was rigid, her movements sharp with anger. I wondered what Michael was telling her right now, how they were planning to explain their way out of this mess. I spent the afternoon in a strange limbo, waiting for the next move in this game I hadn't realized we were playing. I unpacked more of my belongings, ordered groceries for delivery, and tried to focus on making this house my house a home. Around 5:00 p.m., my phone rang again. It was Jessica. "Susan," she began, her voice stripped of its usual saccharine quality. "Kevin told me about your revelation." "You mean about the fact that I own the house you've been secretly visiting and planning to acquire through manipulation? That revelation?" "I think there's been a misunderstanding. Jessica said coolly. We were trying to find a solution that worked for everyone. A solution where you get a mansion and I get a small bedroom and the privilege of funding your mortgage. That solution. You're twisting our intentions. We never wanted to hurt you. I almost laughed. Jessica, you answered my phone and impersonated someone with legal authority over my finances. You obtained keys to my property under false pretenses. You've been showing my house to other people without permission. What part of that was meant to help me? A long pause followed. Then Jessica's voice changed completely, dropping the fake concern and revealing something much colder. Fine. You want to play hardball? You bought that house to manipulate us. You knew we were looking in that neighborhood. Knew we needed more space. You bought it specifically to dangle it in front of us, then snatch it away. The accusation was so ridiculous I actually did laugh. Jessica, I bought the house as a surprise gift for your family. I was planning to hand you the deed and tell you it was yours. Right. That's why you kept it secret for 6 weeks. I kept it secret because I wanted it to be perfect before I surprised you. I had contractors working around the clock to make sure everything was exactly right for your family. Another pause. Prove it, she demanded. I'm sorry. Prove you bought it as a gift. Show me the paperwork that says you intended to transfer ownership to Michael. I realized then that Jessica had never believed I might be generous. In her mind, every action had an ulterior motive. Every kindness was manipulation. She couldn't conceive of someone spending their inheritance on a gift for family members who'd been taking her for granted. I don't need to prove my intentions to you, Jessica. But I can prove that you've been trespassing on my property. Michael's your son. Family has a right to respect boundaries, I interrupted. You lost that right when you decided to lie and scheme instead of having an honest conversation. The conversation ended with Jessica hanging up on me. 20 minutes later, Michael called. Mom, Jessica's upset. She feels like you're punishing her for caring about our family's future. Michael, your wife committed multiple crimes. She's not the victim here. Couldn't we all just sit down and talk this through? Find a way to make this work for everyone? I looked around my beautiful house, thinking about how many compromises I'd made over the years. How many times I'd given in to keep peace in the family. Michael, I'm done making things work for everyone else at my own expense. That evening, as I sat in my beautiful dining room, eating takeout Chinese food off paper plates because I hadn't unpacked my dishes yet, I thought about how different this moment was from what I'd originally planned. I should have been hosting Michael and Jessica for a celebration dinner, toasting their new home and our bright future together. Instead, I was alone in my house, watching security footage of my daughter-in-law trying to break in, while my son prepared to explain how they'd planned to steal my inheritance through emotional manipulation. But here's the thing about rock bottom, the view is so much better when you've earned it yourself. I may have lost the family dynamic I'd hoped for, but I'd found something more valuable: my own voice, my own strength, and the clarity to see the truth about the people closest to me. And that, as Frank would have said, was worth its weight in gold. The following week passed in a strange limbo. Michael called daily, his messages growing increasingly desperate as he tried to arrange a meeting to discuss the situation. Jessica remained conspicuously silent, though my security cameras caught her driving slowly past the house twice more. I used the time to settle into my new home, arranging my belongings and making the space truly mine. The master bedroom I'd designed with such care for Michael and Jessica became my sanctuary. The elegant bathroom my retreat. I planted winter bulbs in the garden beds, looking forward to spring blooms I hadn't anticipated seeing myself. Grace Williams, my next-door neighbor, brought over a welcome basket the third day. She was a retired librarian with silver hair cut in a stylish bob and kind eyes behind tortoiseshell glasses. I noticed you moving in, she explained, handing me a basket filled with homemade jam, fresh bread, and local honey. I'm Grace. Welcome to Elm Street. Susan Miller, I replied, touched by the gesture. Thank you for the welcome. Are you living here alone? Grace asked, accepting my invitation to come in for tea. I hesitated, then decided on honesty. Yes, I recently lost my husband. And this house is, well, it's a new chapter. I understand completely, Grace said, her eyes warm with empathy. I lost my Harold 5 years ago. These old houses have a way of healing broken hearts. I think. As we chatted in my kitchen, I found myself relaxing for the first time in days. Grace asked no probing questions about my finances, offered no unsolicited advice, simply shared stories about the neighborhood and the history of the Victorian homes on Elm Street. Your house has the most beautiful sunrise views, she mentioned. The tower room especially. It's why they called it Morning Glory Mansion back in the day. Morning Glory, I repeated, liking the sound of it. I didn't know it had a name. All these old ladies do, Grace said with a chuckle, gesturing to encompass the house. They've seen generations come and go, but they stand firm, rather like us. Don't you think? After Grace left, I climbed the stairs to the tower room I'd originally envisioned as a reading nook for future grandchildren. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, warming the window seat I'd had custom made. I sat there, looking out over the neighborhood, feeling strangely at peace despite the tumult with Michael and Jessica. Morning Glory Mansion, I said aloud, testing the name. It felt right somehow, a promise of new beginnings after dark times. The next day, Michael called again, this time with a different approach. Mom, Jessica and I need to talk to you about something important. Can we come over to your new house? Just you, I specified, not ready to face Jessica's manipulations. We can talk first, just the two of us. Michael arrived that evening, looking like he'd aged 5 years since our last conversation. His face was drawn, his shoulders slumped as he stood on my porch, not the confident posture of someone planning a home takeover. I led him to the living room, where I'd lit a fire in the original brick fireplace. The room looked inviting with its comfortable furniture and warm lighting, all things I'd chosen with him and Jessica in mind. This place is beautiful, Mom, he said, looking around. You did an amazing job with the renovations. Thank you, I replied, gesturing for him to sit. I designed it for a family. Michael winced at the pointed comment. About that, I owe you an explanation. Yes, you do, I agreed, folding my hands in my lap. Starting with how Jessica got a key to my house, he sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father's that my heart squeezed painfully. She befriended Sarah's assistant at the property management company, told her she was your daughter-in-law and that you'd asked her to check on the renovation progress while you were dealing with grief. The assistant gave her a key for family access. I nodded. This much I already knew from Sarah. And how did Jessica find out I'd purchased the house in the first place? Michael looked down at his hands. She found out about it 3 days after you signed the papers. Your bank called to verify the wire transfer, and Jessica answered your phone. She told them she was your financial power of attorney. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. I never gave her power of attorney. She knows that. But the bank representative didn't ask for documentation over the phone. Jessica got enough information to figure out what you'd done. I poured myself a glass of wine from the decanter on the side table, noting that my hands were perfectly steady. 6 months ago, this level of betrayal would have destroyed me. Now it just felt like confirmation of what I'd suspected. So instead of talking to me directly, you decided to manipulate me into funding your mortgage on a house I already owned. Michael's face crumpled. It was Jessica's idea. She said if we confronted you directly, you might get defensive about spending so much money. She thought if we could make you think it was our idea to buy the house, you'd feel better about helping us. Help you buy a house from myself. The absurdity of it was almost comical. We didn't think you'd actually want to live here alone. Jessica figured you'd eventually